happen. And so that makes you not necessarily sit at the table, or it makes you take a back seat. And so just yesterday I was sitting in a meeting and that exact thing happened, where it was, no, I'm going to put my life on hold a little bit from a career perspective, from some things that I want to do for the business, because basically it was, I don't feel I can have it all. And I thought that was really interesting. So, because it's just happened yesterday. So I definitely agree with everything that she's said.
Well, that just bears point to sometimes women ourselves get in our own way of our accomplishment, and we're all aware of the CEO, who I will remain unnamed, who actually went back to work immediately after having a baby, and just that backlash of how could she do that sometimes just reflects the fact that sometimes we need to get out of our own way as a whole as well.
I think, and also own our skills and our success. I didn't read the book, but I watched a couple of Sheryl Sandberg's videos, and she said women will attribute their success to working hard, luck, and getting help from other people. Men will say, it's because of my own skills. Like, why aren't women saying that? And that's what the reporter said to her. Well, what about your core skills? You know, did that help you? And she said, well, yes. But again, we tend to downplay, oh, well, someone else helped me, or I was just lucky I got in this spot. And I really think we have to get out in front and just say, yep, I have this experience and knowledge and skills, and I'm going to own it.
I'm wondering if you have all had people who encouraged you to do that yourselves. You know, did you have people who helped you along the way, who were kind of mentors and cheerleaders and said, yes, go for this, you're more awesome than you think you are?
Oh, I have had many people who have encouraged me along the way. The number one being my husband, when I would say, well, I don't know, I would doubt myself, and he would say, you know, you are so much better than you think you are. And he would challenge me, and by the same token, I would challenge him. So it's been a great partnership. I've had a lot of women in McDonald's who have been very successful, who have also been good mentors.
In my case, I have had, actually in business, in the insurance business, 2 men that have supported me in the past, and the one encouraged me to make sure I get my license and you can be out there selling. And the other one actually asked me to join the agency as an owner. And I feel they must have both saw something. I guess in one of those meetings that I was in, I did lean in, and they saw something that they said, you know, she's good at what she's doing. And obviously I must have performed, and I felt they supported me, and I did get ahead.
And I feel like the CEO of Crispus Addicts has really supported me. He's thrown me in the water without life jackets many times, and I've survived. And I really think that he saw something in me, and he always encouraged me to be more assertive. And he really held me accountable to for what I do. So I really appreciate his support as far as that goes.
So, given that you've had some encouragement along the way, do you feel that you have a responsibility then to kind of extend a hand to other women? And how do you go about doing that?
I would say yes. And the reason why I say this is because I am working with some young groups of young women who are in business, different types of business, education, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that one of the things that they appreciate is that they have that support system, and that they have someone that's making them accountable, giving them some good advice about things, and just I guess the support is important, because a lot of times I don't feel like I had a lot of support from people when I was going through my days. There were women that supported me and encouraged me, but they didn't know my job and what I did, so I didn't feel like they could support me in that way. But now I think it's important that young people are encouraged. And a lot of times, I know when we talk about the glass ceiling, I always encourage young people, be an entrepreneur, have your own business, then there's no glass ceiling.
I have the good fortune of being involved with Junior Achievement of Central Pennsylvania, and I'm co-chairperson of the committee that plans the Young Women's Future Symposium. It's an annual event we have every year. It's a day of career exploration and self-discovery for students in this local area, young women who are in 10th or 11th grade. And they're chosen for this because they're in the academic middle. So they're not the superstars of the school, and they're, you know, not maybe the less engaged students. They're kind of like those middle of the road girls that probably don't get a lot of attention. And this day is all about them. And we recruit local women to be mentors, facilitators, career panel speakers, and just make it a positive day about all the opportunities that lie ahead for them, and that their future, anything is possible. It's what, you know, they want to do and the path they set out for themselves. So I think that's a great example of encouraging young women.
I didn't
about
realize
their
it
future.
started that young, like
Yeah.
their 11th grade. That's really,
Yeah.
But I guess it's a very formative time.
Yeah, exactly, because they're starting to think about college or careers and all of that. And you do hear when you talk about the family thing, some of those girls are already thinking about family too, and you go, wow, you're still young, you know, think about where you want to go in your life, and that'll come at the right time. But it's a wonderful, inspiring day.
In my early career, I was asked to be part of a McDonald's task force to further the involvement of women in the business, so to offer more opportunities, and that was really a great learning experience for me, and I think that I mentored a lot of people along the way. But what I'm most proud of is the way that my daughters have turned out, because they're now, my first daughter was a very successful PR, had a high-level job in a PR agency, a top PR agency, and she's now chosen to stay at home and be a mother. And my other daughter has chosen to go into the same business that we're in. So I've been very lucky, and I do have the opportunity to mentor a number of people.
I think mentors are very, very important, especially at least in the healthcare industry. I know I myself, you know, we get promoted to supervisory positions because of how well we do clinically. Unfortunately, there's a disconnect, because then they take, that's not that they're taking advantage of it, they're utilizing your multitasking skills, your assessment skills at another level. You know, and unfortunately, sometimes you find the clinician that moves into a supervisor or director role completely floundering out there, because they have the knowledge base to run the position, they just don't have the background to be the best at it. And, you know, that's when we as women leaders, at least in healthcare, need to catch those people and push them forward and encourage them to get that leadership training so that they can move further with their career.
I was going to ask if any of you have felt the need to personally get some kind of outside training beyond the mentoring that you've gotten in your workplaces.
I did. I felt, and it's interesting because the mentoring, I'm at this place where I'm now becoming people's mentor, and they're telling me that, and that is a little scary at times. And I mean, I love that, and I love that, but I also feel that I'm still at that place where I need a mentor. And so I did reach out and became involved in a peer group to just better help me and educate, and because I don't have all the answers. I like to think I do at times, and to my children I do, but I don't have the answers, and I need that support, and I need to feel comfortable to reach out and ask. And I think that's one of the things that women, some of the women that I've seen, the ones that are very confident in their abilities and are willing to lean in at the table, they will ask for help if they need it. And I think that that's really important for growth. And so I have reached out, and I do have a peer group that is composed of men and women that help just me make decisions and help me grow the business. And because, you know, they have life experiences that are very different than what I have. And so it's been very beneficial for me. So I've also gotten to a point where when I find a strong leader that's a woman that might be around my age or a little bit older, I actually will say, can we get together and go to lunch? because, and we go to lunch there's several of them that I go to lunch on a quarterly basis with, because they are like-minded, similar in terms of some of the things that they're going through, whether it's personal or professional. And it's just nice to have them as a resource, because what I have felt is that there isn't, and I've actually thought about doing this, but I've never pulled the whole thing together, is that while there are women networking groups, there's not the women networking group at the level that I feel that I would want to go to, in terms of where there would be real, like kind of this panel sitting at a table, and where you're honest and you're open, and you're willing to admit that you don't have all the answers, because I do think that there's this different level of expectation for women, especially in the business world, that you have to come fully packaged, pulled together, that you know everything, and so I think that there's a need for that, and so I've, in my own way, kind of developed that through these lunches that I have with other people, because it's been very beneficial to me, and it's a great support group, and they are the first people that are there that I can send an email to if I have a question on anything, and I love the responses I get from them. So, there's a balance, I think.
I think you always have to take advantage of every educational opportunity you have, whether it's a 2-hour seminar, or I know when we first started, I knew absolutely nothing about advertising and marketing. So I enrolled at Shippensburg University. I took a couple of classes, and I'm not an expert now by any means, but at least I know what gross rating points and all of those things mean. So you need to keep learning and taking advantage of all the opportunities that are out there.
I suspect we will come back to this, but we have a question that I would like to get up in front of you because it came from a listener and we want to respond to those. So here we go. How often do you encounter men in the workplace who treat you differently because you're a woman? And how do you react? No names, please.
I'll give you an example. When I started Moxie 6 years ago, because I grew up in New York and I moved away for many years and I came back, and so these people that I were dealing with was either they were older, 50s, 60s, and they were men, and they looked at me as I was 35 years old, young. They thought that I knew nothing, and it was very interesting because the sweetie, honey, those types of words, and it got to a point where I just basically challenged them. And I had several bets in the first year that Moxie was in business because they didn't believe that I knew what I was talking about. And so in order for me to actually gain their trust, I bet them. And I put it out there that, look, I'm willing to put my money where my mouth is, and I'm gonna do these things, and I'm gonna prove you wrong. And when I prove you wrong, this is what you're gonna need to do. And it was really interesting because it caught them off guard. They were, okay, go ahead, what do I don't have anything to lose. And along the way, it gained their trust. And it's that, in a different way, I was leaning in by basically betting them. Because if someone tells me I can't do something, or then you know what, that's a problem for me. And I'm gonna do everything and anything to prove them wrong. And so, that was one of those things that over time, they stopped calling me honey, sweetie, those things. And in the first year, in the first 6 months of business, there was one gentleman that we were just starting out, and the way he treated me, I fired him as a client because I didn't think that it was right. It was one thing to treat me that way, it was another to treat my team that way, and that's where I don't tolerate it. And so there was two things where I was willing to, take a risk and take a couple risks, and over time, luckily, they worked out for me, but no names mentioned.
In my case, when I would go to meetings, and usually it was a room that was filled with other men who were owners of insurance agencies, or men who are with the insurance companies, and they found out that I was the owner of the agency. The first thing they said to me, "Oh, does your husband own the agency?" "No." "Oh, was it your father's business?" "No." "It's my agency." But they just couldn't imagine that I could have been the owner of that agency. So now that is different, and there are more women that are owners of their businesses.
For me personally, I really haven't experienced that all that much. I mean, I've kind of grown up in my company. I'll be there 19 years. So I think if anything, some of the men I've worked with have been mentors and supporters. So I don't really feel I've run into that a lot, but you know it's out there and it exists.
Excellent. Okay, so going back to the question we were talking about before, how do you find time to seek out those extra things? I know you're all very busy, you have high positions. Is it difficult to kind of prioritize and say, yes, I need to take time off from my to-do list to get this mentoring, to make these relationships?
You know, I found in my case, I've been the mentor and the mentee, is what I was going to mention before, in that I'm with a women's business organization, and it's part of the entrepreneurial program at your college. And I've worked with the junior and seniors in that program as a mentor, where they're coming in, and we've worked with them just as simple as doing job interviews, where I was that first presentation and I was dressed one way and another lady was dressed another way, and just how we presented ourselves and how we spoke. And so those students themselves could see how they would come across if they were in that job interview. So we were helping them, but then at the same time, like Julie said, you know, you have to make time. Just technology. I think my daughters help me. They're my mentors also, because everything changes, and just technology. I'm fortunate enough to work with them, and I'm constantly learning, and you have to make time to do that.
I think there is a lot of prioritizing, and some days are jam-packed, and then other days there's a little free time. But we all have 24 hours, and we all get to decide exactly what's important that day. And it's sometimes tough, but it works out.
It's very nice when you have that home support that allows you that better balance of your life, to know that, well, I don't have to rush home so much today, or I have this amount of time to put towards educating groups of people or speaking to or other organizations. So as long as you can find that balance, it's really not as big a challenge as it could be.
For me personally, my volunteer opportunities, like the Young Women's Future Symposium, I also volunteer at Middletown High School, Mechanicsburg High School, doing the mock interview stuff. For me, I feel like that's a mentoring opportunity, and in those cases it's male and female students, but to do that for other people. I've realized in people talking, I guess I've casually done the mentoring part when I've gone to lunch with colleagues of mine and just had conversations about different topics that could involve development, and I think I could be more deliberate about that. And we have someone who's certified internally now in coaching, and I had a meeting with him recently, and at first I was a little apprehensive, like meeting, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to talk about me and what makes me good and how I can use those things to be even better. Like, it was turning the focus on me, but it was a great conversation, and you realize the benefit of that, of actually talking through things and seeing situations in a different light that you otherwise wouldn't have maybe made the time to think about because you're too busy.
You know, I think we're all very mentors, whether we know it or not, and it's not something that you're consciously doing. And I've had people come to me just last week. I had a young lady come to me, and she said, do you remember when you did that, da-da-da-da, and she elaborates this entire story. That changed my life, and I'm thinking, you know, I don't even remember that. And she says, you have always been a real mentor to me, and I've never even thought that I was.
We have another question from a reader, which is kind of the opposite of mentoring. What is a specific time you had to ask for help, and how did that help you grow?
Well, in my case, there's so many times I couldn't even enumerate. Many people have been willing to help, and people are willing to help you if you're willing to ask. But sometimes I think that we think that it will be a sign of weakness if you ask, and it really isn't. I think it's a sign of strength if you have the audacity to go and ask for help when you need it.
If I echo that, many of my failures have turned into successes. And there's many times I've had to ask people. I'm not afraid to ask them. That's the only way you can learn. So, I agree.
I agree completely, as I was one of those strong clinicians that moved up into a management role. There were many times where I spent lots of extra hours running around trying to figure out the answer myself, and then eventually realized, why not go to the person directly above me and see how best to handle the situation? And you know, through her mentoring of me, that's when I was strong enough to reach out and get my MBA, which is probably one of the best things I've ever done in my life, outside of having children. So.
Another question from a reader. Do you see female millennials coming into the workplace with more confidence than the previous generations?
Without a doubt.
Yes.
No question.
Yes.
Yes.
Definitely.
Yes, and my office has several of them, and they're probably watching right now. But honestly, what I love about that, and especially in my industry, marketing is an industry for the young. I mean, it's really, you have to be willing, because communication and everything changes so quickly that, you know, the millennials are talking and communicating a different way than we did, and even my parents did. And so it's very important that they contribute and that they feel comfortable, in a sense, to come in and be confident and participate. And I'm very fortunate that the millennials I have in my office, they have stepped up to the table, leaned in, laid on it. I mean, just, you know, they are not, there's no fear there, and I love it. I love it. And, you know, there's a different attitude, and it's refreshing.
They're filled with confidence.
Yeah, they are.
We work
They
with
are.
some of Julie's millennials, and they can do it. It's not a question.
It's literally, get out of my way, I'll take care
Yes,
of it.
exactly.
And it's the greatest thing in the whole world. And what I love seeing that is, I have a daughter who's 11, and she's already has that little, like, sass. I call her sassafras at times. And I love it because I didn't have the confidence when I first started. And, you know, it's funny, when you talk about my first job, I was at a big corporate environment, and my direct boss was a gentleman that looked at me and said, "Oh, isn't it cute, you and your husband are playing house, and now you've got this little job." And, you know, and you know, when people say that stuff to you, you know, not that you want to believe it, but if they say it enough, you kind of. And I love the fact that these millennials come to the table, and it's, I can do everything, and just let me do it. And it's the greatest. The confidence is inspiring in some ways.
And the thing is, if you have grandchildren, not only your children have that confidence, I see it in my daughters, they are raising their children. So in the next 15 years, 20 years, watch out. Because, you know, you ask your grandchild a question, and they let that grandchild answer the question. They don't answer the question for them. And so they're expected, they want them to speak up and voice their opinions. So I can't imagine the workforce, what it's going to be like even 10, 15 years from now.
There's a follow-up question, which is, why do you think female millennials are more confident? Is it because of their education? What other factors do you see at work there?
Honestly, I think it stems somewhat from home. I mean, I think it's passed down, from generation to generation somewhat. My mom and my stepmom, my mom was a working mom, and my stepmother at the time, and it's interesting, just 20, 30 years ago, she was viewed as a word I won't say, but because she was very confident, she was very direct, she was very to the point, she was viewed in a very negative light. And so between those two role models that I had a little bit more confidence in myself in order to feel good about the decisions I was making. I hope to be the same influence on my daughter. And I do think that, women have more opportunities today than they had 30 years ago. And so I do think there's some of that is passed at home. And I also think that in the workplace, there's a lot more opportunity that they can take advantage of. So I think there's multiple things at work here in terms of why they're more confident. I mean, take a look at when I was in high school, and I'm not going to date myself, but it was several years ago. There were female sports, but it was only a couple female sports.
I was going to say the same thing. I think sports is a big thing.
Yeah, so in high school they've got female soccer team, men's soccer team. It's equal across the board. Women's lacrosse, men's lacrosse. I mean, so they're breaking down those barriers there too. So
yeah, there's almost equal opportunities there, and that's a lot of opportunity for leadership and teamwork and everything that's going to develop that young woman into a future leader.
I think the other thing too is that women have more support, more confidence to come out because there's support from their home life. My husband was very supportive of my career, but I felt that when I had meetings and I had to be the person that was juggling to make sure where the kids were going. That was my responsibility. Where today I can see that the spouses are taking more responsibility, and they're saying, yes, I can pick up the kids, and they're now participating. They know we both have important careers, and they're participating in making sure that they're both getting the job done, whatever it may be.
We're imbuing confidence in our kids, and we're taking what we felt we lacked, and supporting them with that. So it really is. It's going to just take off. I mean, we're just going to see this.
Watch out.
Yeah, exponentially, it's going to take off.
We have another question, which I have been told is a great question, so here you go. What questions do you hate being asked about being a woman in a senior level role?
I never had the question.
Yeah.
I can't really.
Don't know that I've ever been asked that either.
Excellent. So, no questions that you hate?
Or they were asked if we didn't realize that we should hate them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
That
I
was
mean,
the other thing I was thinking of.
the questions you were asked about, well, certainly the company's owned by your husband, or
Yeah.
you inherited it from your father. I mean,
Right.
I would say you probably didn't like those questions. But.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I didn't like the question, but now, I guess moving forward, I haven't had the question.
I'm sensing a lot of optimism from you, like moving forward. And I'm hearing that you're seeing things advance, not just kind of on one front, but kind of as a society on a number of fronts. We're just saying, let's make girls more confident, let's do this, let's do this. Am I correct in that?
I mean, I think there's still work to be done. Obviously, the number of CEOs in the Fortune 500 companies were like 4 or 5%, yet we're 50% of the population. So there's still work to be done, but these millennials who are showing energy and passion and want to be out there, I think that's a great start. And just working on the younger girls, one of the things that I think Sheryl Sandberg said is by middle school, boys are more interested in leading than girls, because girls are more interested in being liked. So getting that mentality to change and just keeping the momentum going and giving those girls opportunities to grow.
We're breaking stereotypes. I think we've broken a lot of stereotypes of women as a whole. So, you know, just even with my son going through school, you know, he was the catch-22 of stereotypes. He had glasses and braces, and he did not in any way, shape, or form get any crap for that per se, whereas I did have braces and I got a lot of crap. So just by virtue of us breaking those stereotype boundaries that separate women from men, that in and of itself is astounding.
And I think we're teaching our young people to value the differences.
Correct.
And that's very important, and I think that's one of the reasons why you see all of that. They value each other, where a lot of times we have those things, those stereotypical things. So.
I do think though that and having a daughter who's 11, and I see in the friends, and one of the things that Sheryl Sandberg said about the word bossy is that even in middle school, you know, elementary school, girls who are, even today, girls who are more assertive, more, you know, of a leadership role, they are deemed as bossy. And, you know, I still hear that word, and I don't approve of it. I don't think it's right. So there is some work still to be done. I remember when I was in 7th grade, I actually stopped participating in everything and got really bad grades on purpose because I wanted to be liked. And so, and my parents were like, "What are you doing? Like, what are you doing? Like, what is this?" But it was important to me because going through that awkward time, and you know, being liked is more important than being who you are as an individual. And I got to high school, and thank God something clicked. But you know, it's the feel comfortable in your own skin, and that's what I try to tell my daughter. Is, you know, you are who you are, and you need to be comfortable with that. And you know, there's nothing wrong with wanting to be a leader, because I have 2 sons who are leaders in their own right, and they're viewed very differently, and she's viewed as bossy. And so, you know, I definitely think there's still room to go there.
Speaking of those emotional times, we have a question from Emily. What do you do during those times when you're feeling overwhelmed? If you're a mentor, how do you help your mentees through those times?
Take a deep breath.
Absolutely.
I'll go for a run or
Yeah, I was gonna
exercise.
say
when I'm-
exercise is a good release,
Yeah.
or just getting away and
I write
separating
things,
yourself.
and
Look
write
at
things
journal.
down. Just write things down and take things step at a time. That's what I have to do. I get too overwhelmed at times, and that's what I would recommend to anyone. Just start to write it down and cross it off the list.
Right. Well, it's funny, in December, I had 2 people on my team, 2 key people out on my team out on maternity. And I was feeling very overwhelmed because there was a lot of things going on. Good things, but a lot of things going on. And someone had said to me, "Look, you need to tell them. You need to tell your team where you are. You need to let them in because they will help you." And you know, letting your guard down a little bit at times, and letting the people that are around you, you know, the closest and are in it with you, let them know that, you know, you let them see your vulnerable side a little bit. It was amazing after I did that, the weight that lifted, as well as just the people who stepped up and just were willing to take a little bit of off. I think sometimes admitting that you are at that place, I think, is really important. I think the other thing, by doing that, I think it showed, or I hope it showed my team that it's okay to admit that you might need some help at some times, and that you're feeling overwhelmed, and that, you know, everything's coming at, it's okay, you know, that we've all been there. Letting them feel comfortable enough to be in an environment where they can do that too, I think is important.
It sounds like a balancing act in some ways, like be confident, own your success in what you're doing, but at the same time, I'm hearing ask questions. Don't be afraid to let people know where you really are.
Absolutely, yes.
Another great question from a reader. What do you find most rewarding in your job?
Oh, I would say seeing your people grow, seeing people who start out and how they move ahead in the business.
No question. I have a staff in my office that is just wonderful. They take control of the work, they know what has to be done, and everyone just moves forward, and it just makes life easier for everyone performing.
Mine is outcomes. Mine is seeing patients who couldn't walk, couldn't drive, couldn't talk, walk out of my facility and become productive members of society again.
Wow.
And making sure that we, as an organization, are doing the right things the right way for every patient that walks in our door. And I really take pride in those success stories. Because even behind every success story, there's one that's not quite as successful. But when you have the staff and the quality of care that you're delivering to these patients, you know that you've given them every opportunity they have. And that is something that makes me sleep very well at night.
I would say just helping my company navigate through the ever-changing landscape of our industry. Nothing ever stays the same for very long, as most companies. So being a part of that change and a catalyst and helping lead those changes is very exciting. And you know, the future looks good because we're continuing looking at where should we be going? Do we need change direction? Do we need to do things differently? And I'm a part of that.
Yeah, I think for me, just attending college graduations and just seeing people who you saw them in high school and now they have their own business or they're working towards being a part of something, you know, bigger than what they were before. Even they couldn't see that they graduated. Our graduations for Youth Bill are so emotional because a lot of those students, that's their second chance, and they never expected that at all. They never expected to graduate from high school. And I think seeing that makes me happy. It really does. It's a very emotional night.
Another question, this one from Josie. What's the most valuable leadership training you've ever received? Was it a course, a seminar, a mentor?
I think I would say on-the-job training. You learned as you went along. It wasn't any specific thing, but as the business changed, you learned to go with it.
I would say all of the above. At some point or another, you've utilized a little bit of everything, and hopefully that utilization was the right choice at the right time.
I mean, college courses or training can give you a foundation, but it's actually getting in there and doing it. I remember when I went back for my master's, and so I was older, and I was just like, wow, I should have paid more attention in undergrad. You know, but you didn't have the work experience. Like, you're 18 in college, you don't have the work experience to really relate to what you're learning, but so I think you need both, the foundation, the concepts, and then getting in there and actually experiencing it.
Excellent. One thing that I wanted to ask is, and you've talked about this kind of around this, but what one piece of advice would you give other women in business? Anything that you wished you could say to them?
Go for it. Don't be afraid. Because I think a lot of times that's what's held a lot of people back, is being afraid. Don't be afraid. Stay focused, because people will take you off the path in a minute. So that's part of what I would say to them.
I would say own your gifts. you have unique talents and abilities in a combination that no one else has, and instead of focusing on what you think you aren't good at, focus on the things that you realize are your natural talents and abilities and develop them.
Yeah, I would say stay focused and remember that what you're doing is what you are passionate about, and it's hopefully to an end, to a means that you want to achieve. And you know, there's only two masters that you serve, and one is your job and one is yourself. And as long as they coincide, you're always going to be successful.
I think, I wish someone would have said to me, don't feel guilty. Stop feeling guilty. Particularly as a working mom, I wish someone would have sat down and said, you know, only you can make yourself feel guilty. No one else can do that. That comes internally. Because I do think there's this balance of, am I being everything to everybody that I need to be? And there's this overriding sense of guilt that I'd be hard pressed to find a woman that doesn't feel it, especially when you're a mom and you're working. So I would remove the guilt, take the risks, you know, stay focused, and everything's going to be okay. You know, it's your kids will be okay if you do these things, and don't feel guilty about it.
I agree, remove the guilt, but what I would say is accept the challenge. Nothing motivates me more than for someone to say, well, you can't do that.
Yeah.
Well, I'll show you I can.
Absolutely.
I think you need to develop that attitude.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe sometimes you'll fail. It does happen, but at least you've given it your best shot.
And I think too, you have to work hard, do more than what's expected of you,
Oh, absolutely.
and also you will succeed because of your performance, not because of your gender. You will succeed if you work hard.
And one last question as we're wrapping up, and this kind of ties into what we were just talking about, but if you could talk to preteen and teenage girls, what would you say to them about how to succeed in business? So for that specific audience.
Well, I think, again, it's about knowing what you're good at, where your strengths lie, what you're interested in, and really gaining exposure to career fields that you might be interested in. I see a lot of that going on in schools now where they're getting kids out there, and I think that's really important to find yourself, so to speak. I mean, it's tough. It's a young age. They still have a lot of life ahead of them to figure everything out, but at least know where your tendencies and interests are that can help guide you to your future path.
I think I would say believe in yourself. You can do anything that you set your heart and mind to. If you work hard enough, you will be successful.
And I also think, what's the worst thing that can happen?
Right.
I mean, you know, they joke about me at the office that, you know, I'm not scared to make a decision. I'll make a decision, and I'll make a decision to get me out of the decision I made to get into. So, you know, but if you don't take a chance and you don't assert yourself from the standpoint of knowing that there's nothing that you do that can't be undone one way or another. And the greatest life lessons that you will have are when you fail at something. I mean, so don't be scared of failure. Look at it from the standpoint of what am I going to learn? What am I supposed to learn? Because chances are, if you didn't learn it that time, you're going to fail at it again, and then maybe the second time you'll actually get the point. But don't be scared.
Take the risk.
Take the risk.
Take the risk. Don't be could've, would've, should've.
Right.
Just making sure we have no further questions here, but I think we're good. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for your time.
Thanks.